Hi, my name is Michele Paradise, and welcome to my channel where I share evidence-based information coupled with my own personal experiences to help you navigate the most challenging relationships in your life, especially the one with yourself. So let's get started. What happens to us before we die? Have you ever asked yourself that question? I have many times, and I've actually had some experience with that. So I'd like to share that with you today. But first, I'm going to refer to a book that I absolutely love called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying by Bronnie Ware. She's Australian, and you may have heard of her. You may have heard of her on podcasts. You may have even read the book or read her blogs. And she talks about her experience of 8 years working in hospice with dying patients. Now, not just when they were dying, but what leads up to them dying as well. Now, this may sound like a heavy subject. It may sound a bit depressing, but trust me, it's not, because you're here now, which means you're alive. And if you're alive, you get the chance, the opportunity to make some changes in your life so you don't have any of these 5 top regrets when you die, because dying is inevitable for all of us. So the first top regret is I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not life others expected of me. Now, you know me, I talk a lot about people pleasing. I am actually a recovering people pleaser. I think it will be my lifelong journey because I've been so conditioned, which is what she talks about as well in a different way. But I'm going to use the position of people pleasing, which is conditioning from childhood. And we now know that there are 4 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, which is another way of saying people pleasing. And this was the most common regret of the 5 that when she sort of inadvertently gathered her data. And what happens is people realize, when they realize that their life is almost over and look back clearly on it, it's easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people had not honored even half of their dreams and had to die knowing that it was due to choices they had made or not made. I'm sure you're all familiar with being on an airplane, and before you fly, they give you the health and safety talk. And they say something like this: in the unlikely event that the cabin pressure drops and you're with a younger person or an incapacitated person, please put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Now, people used to balk at this and say, well, no, I have to put it on them because I want to save their lives. But if you are dead, you cannot save anybody's life. If you are emotionally dead, spiritually dead, you cannot positively impact anyone else's life. So please honor your dreams first and do not abandon yourself to fulfill the needs of others. And this applies to your family as well, because so many of us are mothers and we feel that we have to sacrifice everything for our children. And there's this really wonderful quote. I'm still not sure who said it, but it goes something like this: heal the mother, that can be father as well, heal the child. So heal the mother, heal the child. Many mothers say to me, my daughter is going through this, my son is going through that. What can I do? What kind of help can I get them? And especially when they're young, I suggest that they really focus on themselves and their own healing, because their children are watching and absorbing everything they do. So if you have high levels of anxiety, high levels of fear, high levels of stress, they will be absorbing all of that. If you are in a relationship that is very toxic, they're watching you. They're watching you relate in that relationship. They're watching your depression. They're watching your unhappiness. They are watching how a partner communicates with another partner. And that's where they're getting all of their information that they're going to take out into the world themselves. So please be careful and aware of your own behaviors. Because if you are not well, if you are not healthy, from the moment that you lose your health, it's too late, because health brings a freedom that very few people realize until they no longer have it. And health, I love this phrase by Bronnie. She says, space is medicine. Really want you to remember that. I'll repeat it. Space is medicine. So, what do I mean by space? Space is the space that we allow ourselves to breathe, to regroup, to take time for ourselves, not to be giving our emotional and energetic bank account all the time without topping it up for ourselves. Because when that bank account is empty, we're running on fumes, we're running on empty, we have nothing left to give anybody. And that's when we get sick. And I'm not here to frighten you, I'm here to wake you up because this is so important. Our health is everything. And we need to be healthy and whole of mind, body, and spirit in order for the people that we want to positively impact in our lives get the ability and the opportunity to do that. She uses the word courage in that phrase, but courage is actually, in my mind, a self-judgment because we're saying to ourselves, I wish I had the courage, as if it was a question of cowardice. It isn't. It's a question of programming. No infant is born suppressing themselves. No infant enters the first day on this earth trying to please anybody and everybody. They're just being purely themselves, expressing their joy when it's there, expressing their upset, their distress, when that's dominant, but they're purely themselves. So, what people call courage of being myself is actually a trauma imprint. For some reason, the child learned early in life that to be themselves is to court rejection by their environment. So it's not a lack of courage. It is a shorthand for something happened to me that I gave up my true self for the sake of being accepted. And that cost can be physical illness. And that cost can be lack of self-respect and loss of dignity. So it is so important that we look after ourselves, that we follow our dreams, that we allow them to unfold just the way they're meant to, without judgment and without shame. And I'll talk about that one later. The second one is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. Now, this came from every male patient that she spent time with on their deathbed. And now more and more women are saying this because her research was based on an older generation where women didn't work so much, but now women are working almost the same amount of time that men are. They miss their children's childhood, their partner's companionship. All of them deeply regretted spending so much of their lives on the treadmill of work. And they didn't know how to stop because they developed this belief that they had to work that hard to afford, and I'm talking about physically and financially, afford the lifestyle that they wanted. So I'd like to ask yourself a couple questions at this point. Do you really need the expensive lifestyle that you have become accustomed to? Think about it. Are you happy in your job? Have you chosen this job? Or did you have a lot of external pressure from your family, from your parents, from your ancestors to be a doctor, a lawyer, anything? I'm not having a go at any of those professions, but I meet so many people, men and women, that their families wanted them to be a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist or an engineer, something really substantial. And they come to me 5, 10, 15 years down the line in tears saying, I hate my job. I don't want to do this, but I've done this for my family, which goes back to number one, living a life for somebody else. So think of ways that you can simplify your life. And that could look like maybe doing one less day a week in the job that you have now and spending that other day creating a side hustle in a career that you'd really like, dipping your toe in the water. Maybe you want to be a singer, songwriter. Maybe you want to be an actor, an actress. Maybe you want to be an entrepreneur and have a YouTube channel. I don't know what your dreams are. Maybe you want more freedom, to be a digital nomad and to travel and still work. Things like that. A lot of people want to do because they're very creative, they're very entrepreneurial, but they're stuck in this, I'd say 9 to 5 job, but it's actually a lot longer than 9 to 5 nowadays. And people take their work home with them. And because we have the internet and our phones always at our disposal, they interrupt us all the time. So you can make conscious choices along the way. It is possible to not need the income that you think you do. And by creating more space, remember, space is medicine. By creating more space in your life, you can become happier and more open to new opportunities. It is possible. I know I've done it. I've absolutely done this. You'll see and expand your mind to see opportunities that are more suited to your lifestyle so that you can spend more time with your children, with your families, with your friends, with yourself, doing the things that you want to do. So I'll say for the third time, space is medicine. Allow yourself the space to find out who you really are, not on your deathbed when you're lying there wishing I could have, would have, should have done that. The third one, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. Now, many people had their emotions suppressed to keep peace with others. What is the expression? Go along to get along. Keep calm and carry on. Stiff upper lip, pull your socks up, things like that. Big boys don't cry. You've heard them all. They settled for a mediocre existence and never became who they were capable of being. And on their deathbed, they lie there with regret because they didn't follow who they were. And because of that, many developed illnesses relating to bitterness and resentment that they carried as a result. And that goes back to number 2. It goes back to all of them. Doing a job that you didn't choose to do, doing a job to please your family because you knew they worked hard and they wanted the best opportunity for you. But this is your life, the one and only life you get. And I've been around a lot more corners now than some of you. And I know at this stage of my life how true that expression is, that I got one shot at it. And I'm happy to say that I did follow a lot of my dreams, although this isn't about me. And I do have some regrets, which I'll talk about regrets later, not necessarily mine. But I want to die knowing that I didn't leave anything on the table, that even if I made mistakes along the way, choosing jobs and choosing things that I thought were good for me, I want, and I know I feel really, really good about them. So there is an evidence-based connection that by suppressing emotions and being what everyone else wants you to be, this can lead to chronic and life-changing illnesses, I'm sorry to say. It's not your fault, it's your conditioning, and it's not your parents' fault. Some people think when I talk about things like this that I'm blaming the parents. Please let me say that I never blame the parents. I am one myself. I know I made mistakes. And you always have the ability to apologize to your children, no matter how old or how young they are. They will get it. What this is generational trauma, legacy trauma. It is not your fault. It's not your parents' fault. It's not your grandparents' fault. It is passing down unprocessed, unresolved issues, traumas, whatever you want to call them. And we don't make any changes. So we keep carrying on and they compound and compound. We cannot change or control the reactions of others and how they may react to your honesty about your emotions. But in the end, it will elevate the relationship to a healthier level, or it releases an unhealthy relationship from your life. And that is what a boundary looks like, because we haven't talked about boundaries, but this is the perfect example of, in the perfect moment, boundaries. One of my favorite words, because where there's resentment, you need a boundary, or you needed boundaries. Okay, so this is your chance to create some boundaries, to say no. I know people say no is a complete sentence, and I know for many of you, no is not possible. I get it, because you over apologize, you over explain, but let's find somewhere in the middle where you can say, no, thank you. Can we do something next week? Or no, thank you. This is not a good time for me right now. Or just say nothing. That's a boundary too. Have some boundaries for self, how much time you spend in these toxic relationships with people that you really don't want to be around. So, although people may initially react when you change the way you are speaking honestly, in the end, it raises the relationship to a whole new, healthier level. And either that or it releases the unhealthy relationship from your life. And either way, as I see it, you win. You absolutely win. The fourth regret, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Wow, this is a big one for many of us. This is definitely a big one for me. And I've moved and traveled most of my life. So I've made friends, and sometimes it gets hard to stay in touch with them. But when I get to the end of this, I'd really like you to pick up your phone and text one of your friends, leave a voice message, send an email, whatever is comfortable to you. And just reach out and say, hi, I'm thinking about you. No matter how many years it's been, just let them know. You'll be surprised. Do it with 5 people if you can. Move the energy. That's my motto. Move the energy. Always move the energy. So often, people on their deathbed would not truly realize the full benefits of their friendships until their dying weeks. And it wasn't always possible to track them down, according to Bronnie. And that was her experience. Many had become so caught up in their own lives and their work, and they had let these golden friendships slip by over the years. There were many deep regrets about giving friendships the time and effort that they deserved. How many times do you say to yourself, I'll call Mary, I'll call Anna, I'll call Bob, I'll call John, I'll call my mother, I'll send them a message. I'll do it later, I'll do it later, I'll do it later. Forget the later. Why don't you set yourself a time? And I'm not joking. This works with grief as well. When we're grieving, this works beautifully with anything. Set yourself a time of day, maybe 6:30 in the evening or whatever works for you, and say, I'm going to message some of my friends and reconnect with them. I've done this, and it's remarkable what happens. It really, really is. Everyone misses their friends when they're dying. And she told us this. She knows. So listen to it. It's so common for us to get into a busy lifestyle. But when you're faced with your approaching death, the physical details of life really fall away. Money, cars, houses, that all falls away. People, they want to get their financial affairs in order, but it's not about the money or the status that holds the real importance for them. It's about love. Love for the people that they're leaving behind, for the benefit of those that they love. Because all that remains in the final weeks are 2 things: love and relationships. That's it. That's what we think about. So remember, after this video, please sit down and text, message, email, voice message some of your friends and let them know that you're still here, that you think of them, whatever you want to say to them. Just do it. Move the energy. The 5th one is, I wish that I had let myself be happier. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not happy. It's just happier, okay? And I'll explain that as I go along. This is actually a surprisingly common one. Many people did not realize until the end that happiness is a choice. You know, they stayed stuck in old patterns and habits. They stayed stuck in bad relationships. The fear of change had them pretending to others, and more importantly to themselves, that they were content when they weren't. When deep within, they longed to laugh and be playful again, but they just wouldn't make that choice. They wouldn't allow themselves to do it. So when you're on your deathbed, what others think of you is a long way from your mind. Don't wait for that moment. do it now. Be playful. Really be playful. And what I mean by playful is playful has no destination. It isn't, I'm going to play tennis with my friend and I'm going to win. It's not competitive. It's silly. Remember those times when your face hurt because you laughed so hard, or your belly hurt because you laughed so hard, and you don't even remember what you were laughing about? I was babysitting a friend's son this weekend, an autistic child, beautiful human being. And we were watching a film and something really funny came on, and he laughed and laughed and laughed. And he held his tummy and he fell on the floor laughing. And it was just such a wonderful reminder of how, as children, we just laugh. We don't care what we look like. We don't care how we sound. We don't care how long it goes on. We just laugh. Please recapture that, because on your deathbed, you will want to have had more of those moments, because life is a choice. It is your life. Choose consciously, choose wisely, choose honestly, choose happiness. There's a great quote by somebody I really admire, Viktor Frankl, who wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. This man was in a concentration camp where when I read it, I just thought, no way, I don't believe I could have had his strength. But he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. So as I've told you, I like to mix evidence-based information with my own personal stories. And I'm going to share two of them with you about both of my parents dying. And trust me, they're not sad. They're not sad at all. In fact, I think they're very, very uplifting. The first one is my father. My father had a massive heart attack at the age of 50. And he was rushed to hospital, and he had two, as he describes it, two very large men pounding on his chest, getting his heart to start again. They were doing CPR. They weren't just pounding on his chest, they were doing all the other things as well. And he was in a coma afterwards, and we came to see him in his coma. And we didn't know whether he was going to live or die at that point, because he had such extensive heart damage. And I'm happy to say that he did come back to life. He did survive. And when we stood at his bedside, now my father was 6'4", big, powerful man, big booming voice. I never saw my father cry, and there he was lying, crying, tears streaming down his face. And sorry, I get emotional talking about this. And he looked at us. My father wasn't a very emotional man in terms, I know he was very emotional inside, but he didn't share his emotions. I really never knew what he was thinking until that moment. And he smiled and he cried at the same time. And he said, I'm going to say something to all of you, and I hope that you understand what I mean by it. He said, but when I died, I began to see this white light. And I know many people have said this. And my father wouldn't have known this. It's not something that he would have heard. He wasn't that kind of guy. And he said, and as I got closer and closer to that white light, I felt more and more peaceful and not at all afraid. And then this incredible pain, this force pulled me back into life. And of course, because of the CPR and the circumstances, he had incredible pain, bruising on his chest. And he said, I love you all so much, but I would have been very happy to continue. I was not afraid to die. And I just want to share that with you, he said, which was very bittersweet for us to hear. And we were all delighted that he had survived. My father lived for another 15 years, and then he died suddenly in his sleep, which was, for me, the best way he could have gone. And then there was my mother. Now, my mother was living on her own, not really ill. She had some health issues, and she lived in an assisted living community. And her organs began to shut down. And it's not important why, but that's what happened. And she then slipped into a coma. I was 3,000 miles away at the time, and my brother called me up and said, "You've got to get here now." And so I did. And I went with my children and saw my mother. My brother said to me, because he's a nurse practitioner, he knew and understood a lot of this. He said, "When she hears your voice, she will probably rally," which I thought would be wonderful, but did not expect that at all. So, of course, that's exactly what happened. I spoke to her as if she was completely conscious. My daughter, my son spoke to her. And the next day, she rallied a bit. And what I mean by rallied is she just moved a bit more. She wasn't like totally quiet in a coma. And we actually thought she might wake up, but she didn't. So the next day, it was my daughter and I, just the two of us, and my brother and son were out getting some much needed things. And we were told that my mother probably was going to die in the next 24 hours or so. But this was what I want to share with you. She wore glasses. Of course, her glasses were off. They were sitting on a bedside table. And she suddenly opened her eyes. And my daughter got very excited and said, "I'm going to get Nana's glasses and put them on." So she put her glasses on. And my mother looked up at us. She just looked up at us and she smiled. And we then got very excited. And then my mother looked higher up and she smiled even more. And then she took her last breath, closed her eyes, and she passed. And the nurse came in because we alerted the nurse, and the nurse came in to confirm that she had passed. And I told her what happened, and she said, "Oh, honey, that happens a lot. She saw angels." And that gave me such a wonderful feeling, because my mother was a very religious, and this isn't necessarily about religion. My mother was a very religious person, and she believed that there was a higher power. And in that moment, I know that she saw it, and that gave me great peace. So there is so much that goes on with the dying. And I just wanted to share all of this with you and Bronnie's wonderful work, because I don't want you to have regrets when you die. Because if life doesn't work out the way you had it planned, allow it to unfold as it is unfolding. Let yourself be surprised. Life will unfold the way it's meant to unfold. And there's a great quote: "Make friends with the unknown." So I hope this has helped you in some way. And sorry for my emotions, but they're good emotions. And I needed to hear this as much as you needed to hear this, because no matter how old you are, 20s, 30s, 50s, 70s, whatever age you are, you need to wake up now so you don't have these regrets. Call those people. Think about what you can do differently in your career. Stop living to please everybody else. Take time for yourself. Be happier. Allow yourself to be playful. There's still that little child inside. Let him or her come out now. Thank you all very much for, if you got to this point, staying with me today. Thank you very much. I look forward to seeing you in our next video. And I'm going to put a lot of the information that I referred to today, Bronnie's book and Viktor Frankl and all of that, in the blurb below. And please, as always, remember, subscribe so that you don't miss the upcoming videos. Keep well, stay safe, and see you soon.